of Defense has released hundreds of never-before-seen files on UFOs. This is part of President Trump's effort to increase transparency on government knowledge of possible extraterrestrial activity. Here are some of the new pictures on the Department of Defense's website. It includes one image from the Apollo 17 mission to the moon. I can't quite make this out.
I have no idea what I'm
it's
looking
basically, apparently it appears to show lights above the lunar surface. So for more on this, we called in an expert, Avi Loeb. He's a Harvard astrophysicist who leads the Galileo project, which focuses on this kind of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. You've been going through these files. What stood out to you?
Thanks for having me. Well, the Apollo images are indeed quite interesting. There is another release from Apollo 12 of some lights above the horizon. One thing to keep in mind is that there is no atmosphere to the moon, so any object will go straight and impact the surface without burning up in the atmosphere, as often we see in meteors on Earth. And so that means that you can generate light as a result of these impacts. And that's the one thing I would like to clarify, whether these lights could be the result of impacts by rocks on the surface of the moon, which happen all the time. The Artemis 2 astronauts noticed of other 6 or 8 flashes of light associated with that when they passed near the moon. So that's one interesting set of data, but there are also a lot of documents which are quite intriguing. For example, there is a document from December 19th, 1947 to the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force in Washington. And the first point that is made in that letter is that there are reports on flying saucers, flying discs. And these are serious people, exchanging secret memos among themselves. And the fact that serious people, we know that also more recently from pilots that are reporting unusual things they see, that deserves attention. We need to figure out what instruments recorded and try to understand whether these are natural phenomena, whether these are adversarial nations, or perhaps some very advanced technologies that we are not aware of, that are not human-made. Irrespective of whether the last interpretation is the correct one or not, we need to figure these things out. And any person should be filled with curiosity when seeing all these files. There will be more released every week or so. We heard that there will be weekly installments. So this is really the very first installment. And my guess is that the more interesting documents, information, videos will be released in future weeks, because they take more time for the declassification process to allow us to see them. And in particular, there are 46 videos that were requested by Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna that hopefully will come out in the next batch of releases.
So some logical explanations there, rocks as opposed to perhaps extraterrestrial activity, Professor. But in your vast knowledge and expertise, you don't believe that we're the only carbon-based life forms in the entire universe, do you?
Not at all. I don't even think that we are at the top of the food chain.
Oh, wow.
The Milky Way galaxy is full of 100 billion stars like the sun, and about 10% of them have a planet roughly the size of the Earth at roughly the same separation. So it would be arrogant of us to assume that we are unique and special, and most of the stars formed billions of years before the sun. So there was plenty of time for even a spacecraft like Voyager that was sent out of the solar system 50 years ago. Even for that, to cross the entire Milky Way galaxy, it takes about 1 billion years. There was plenty of time for other civilizations that predated us to reach to our backyard. So I think it should be treated as an experimental, observational task for us to figure out if we are being visited. And if we are visited, of course, that would inspire us to visit the backyard of the senders of these probes.
Oh, Professor, I have so many questions.
I
One
know.
is, does
My
this
brain's
scare you?
exploding.
Because this scares me, right? Like, if we have been visited, I find that all scary.
Why?
Maybe I've seen too many movies.
No, because the professor is.
I think never come in peace. Maybe initially, but
no. But the idea, Professor, that so you made an interesting point, right? Which is that the universe is much older than this planet, and that we're talking about systems that are light years away from us. If a system, if aliens have the ability to travel at the speed by which they could arrive here on planet Earth, which there's nothing that we know of that fast, and by that very nature, perhaps they would have gotten rid of all the things that plague us: war and division and strife. That's my sort of idealistic hope.
So the way to think of this is like a blind date of interstellar proportions. And when you go on a blind date, you never know if the dating partner will be friendly or a serial killer, right? And so, my approach is I'm sufficiently frustrated with the daily news, reading the news every day here on Earth, that I'm willing to experience whatever we find, because my hope is that it will bring us to a better place. We would not be as arrogant as we are. We would not be, engaged in conflicts all the time here on Earth, because there would be something else out there that we should think about. So all in all, I think it would bring us, it will be a good transformation for humanity. And that's why I think we should search for anything. The other thing to keep in mind is, even if we are not willing to believe that, the question of whether we have a neighbor or not does not depend on what we think. Either we have a neighbor that is visiting us or not. And so our duty, at least my duty as a scientist, is to look at the evidence and figure out what it means. And I'm here to help government in this process as more data is being released.
Professor Avi Loeb, thank you so
great.
much.
That's what I needed for the weekend.
Yes, on this optimistic note. And it's like what the astronauts said when they were in outer space, looking back at us. They felt that we all needed to be more united.
Yes.
And that is that same sentiment. Professor, thank you.
Professor
All right, we'll have
Avi
more
Loeb
news
that was great.
after the break. This is CBS News 24/7 Morning.
And the Department of Defense today started releasing previously classified documents related to UFOs. The files included dozens of videos of unresolved reports of sightings of unidentified aerial phenomenon, like this one that you see here from 2013 that was spotted somewhere in the Middle East. Some of the documents also contain photos taken from the surface of the moon of objects observed by NASA astronauts during the Apollo 12 and Apollo 17 missions. President Trump had long promised to release documents like these. Alex Dietrich joins me now. She's a retired Navy fighter pilot and has spoken about her own experience encountering a UFO during a training exercise. Thanks so much for being here. I want to get to that experience in a minute. But you were one of the many people who were pushing for these files to be released. I remember the president talking about doing so on the campaign trail and the like. Why did you want these to be released?
I think that transparency is the right instinct here, and I'm genuinely glad that this material is out in the public domain. What I would do is caution any impulse to treat today as an answer. So it's the beginning of a process. The Pentagon said so themselves, that these files have yet to be fully analyzed. And so right now our response should be to read them carefully, be patient, and not race to any conclusion.
What do you think needs to happen to make sure we can kind of better understand these incidents?
Yeah, I think that we need to approach this systematically. Again, this is an important first step. We need to work together. When we talk about the Pentagon, we should also be talking about NASA. We should also be talking about the FAA. This is a national security concern. It's also a safety of flight issue. And of course, the big brain scientists at NASA and even in academia really should be a part of this to help us contextualize the data and make sense of it, maybe even see if there's some predictive trends in the data so that we can find when and where the next incident might happen.
And I mentioned in the intro that you have your own experience seeing a UFO. What was that like? Can you tell us a little bit about what you saw and how did you report it?
Sure. Our incident, the USS Nimitz Tic Tac encounter, is sometimes what it's referred to as, happened off the coast of California in 2004. We were in the middle of training, pre-deployment training, getting ready to go to the Gulf. And so we were not carrying weapons. We were practicing our maneuvers, and we saw something strange. We couldn't identify it. It was the middle of the day, clear blue skies, calm waters, and we saw this strange object behaving strangely with weird physics. And so we reported it. We reported it through our intelligence channel and our chain of command. But part of the value of having these documents released today and talking about it in a serious and grounded way is to encourage other people who see strange things to say something, to report them, and then to have a system, office and analysts there to receive the information, the technology and tools to analyze it. And again, maybe we can predict when and where something will happen and make sense of whether this is a national security threat, a safety concern, or just something curious for scientists.
Yeah, and the follow through, as you mentioned, is critical here. And this is just the first batch, so we'll see what else comes out from these releases. Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Pentagon is releasing and declassifying files on UFOs. This includes eyewitness testimony, photos, and reports of sightings of unexplained objects. So I want to bring in Seth Shostak, senior astronomer at the SETI Institute in Northern California. Seth, thank you so much for being with us. First, can you explain to us what the SETI Institute does?
Yeah, well, the SETI Institute, it does many things, many kinds of research. That's what it is, research organization, all connected to the idea of is there other life in the universe beside what we find here on planet Earth? And that includes, of course, things like plants and, other sort of stupid life. No affront to the plants, but still. And maybe more famously to looking for, intelligent alien life, which we've been doing for a long time.
And so what do you make of the Pentagon's release of these new materials today? Did you learn anything? Anything surprise you?
Well, to be honest, this kind of stories that are very analogous to what was released today, appear about every couple of months in the news because, somebody says something somewhere. I think you have to look at it this way. If really there was good evidence for aliens, cruising our skies, which is the implication of today's story, that would be something that would be noticed by, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. It would be noticed by astronomers. It would be noticed by, Joe Sixpack in his backyard. And that doesn't happen. These stories have been, circulating for at least a half a century, and we've not really learned anything from that.
Yeah, I got to say, Seth, there's a lot of skeptics who are going to believe that these pictures are, frankly, of objects created by our foreign adversaries, namely Russia and China, who send these unique objects to our airspace to distract us and also potentially gather more information about our own surveillance capabilities. What do you make of that theory?
No, I think it's a good theory, and it's undoubtedly true. I mean, it's been proven to be the case in some, specific circumstances. It's also the case that there are something like 8,000 satellites orbiting the Earth. Most of them have cameras that are looking down, and some of those are military, reconnaissance satellites. So, they're looking down, and they're up there in the sky a couple of 100 miles above your head. They reflect a little sunlight now and then, so they look like bright objects sailing across the sky. So these things get reported. People get all upset about them, or at least excited about them, thinking that the aliens are about to land. But unfortunately, it's probably not the aliens. It's probably humans.
What do you think is the most compelling evidence thus far in your own research that there is extraterrestrial life beyond our planet?
Yeah, well, to be honest, there is no compelling evidence so far for extraterrestrial life. I mean, if that weren't the case, that would be a huge story. If we really had proof that there was some sort of life, even if it's stupid life, right, on some planet X light years away, whatever, that would be on the front page of every newspaper in the country, because that would be really interesting. That would tell you right away, hey, life is not a miracle. It's not just limited to Earth. Life is all over the place. So that would be a big story. But you haven't read that big story yet because we've never found that evidence. Personally, I think that life is probably, like fire hydrants or whatever, very, very common all over the place, but we still haven't found it.
So you don't think the government is hiding alien corpses somewhere? A lot of people believe. You don't believe that there's aliens walking among us, that there's spaceships orbiting our planet here. You don't believe any of that? No,
those would be huge stories if true. But the aliens probably wouldn't limit their visits just to the United States. They might also want to, visit other interesting countries like Bulgaria or whatever. I mean, you would think that if this were true, right, it would be a story worldwide, but it's not.
Seth Shostak, thank you so much. Always good to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Keeping it real. All right. The Pentagon is releasing and declassifying numerous files on UFOs. This includes eyewitness testimony, photos, and reports of sightings of unexplained objects, like this photo right here. Government knowledge of non-human intelligent life was the subject of the documentary The Age of Disclosure, released back in November. The filmmakers spoke to 34 high-level U.S. government, military, and intelligence insiders.
We've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities, and it's not ours.
These are otherworldly things that are performing maneuvers that haven't been seen.
I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
Even presidents have been operating on a need-to-know basis, but that begins to ramp out of control.
Okay, I want to bring in Dan Farah, the director and producer of The Age of Disclosure. Dan, great to see you again. We talked to you when your film first came out. Great to have you back. Shortly after your film came out, though, President Trump issued a historic directive to declassify evidence, and the first trace of evidence just came out today. Did you think we'd see this kind of disclosure from the government when you started making this film?
Yeah, look, the hope for the film was that it would create a national conversation that led to unprecedented government action, and that's exactly what happened. I think we're at a major turning point in human history and U.S. history right now, and I'm super proud of the role the film's playing in that. It was less than 3 months after the film's release that Trump issued that presidential directive to declassify evidence of non-human intelligent life and UAP, previously referred to as UFOs, and that was middle of February, and here we are not long after, and the first tranche of evidence being declassified was released today. All my relationships inside of government have made it clear to me that this is just the federal government tipping their toe in the water. There's going to be a number of more tranches of evidence released, and as time goes on, it'll be even more significant evidence released.
Did you learn anything new from these files that were just released?
Yeah, I learned some new stuff, but also it was great to see things that I knew existed finally get released. So amongst the evidence released today is a photo from the 1972 Apollo mission that shows a triangular craft, a structured craft, hovering above the moon and the astronauts on the mission in 1972. I've been told by a number of the sources in my film that existed over the last few years. So seeing that released today, I think that's very significant.
Now, you spoke to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle for this documentary. Here's a clip of two of them sharing how they feel about the information that they know. Take a look.
We've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities, and it's not ours, and we don't know whose it is. That alone, just that statement alone, deserves inquiry, deserves attention.
Rubio and I are aligned 100%. We do not find it acceptable to have unknown aerial phenomenon.
It's just not an issue, at least as of yet, in this country that lends itself to some sort of partisan or ideological divide.
Now, Marco Rubio, now the Secretary of State and in the middle of some pretty big global events. Have you talked to him since making this film? Is he part of the behind the scenes of releasing these new files?
He's definitely a part of the process behind the scenes. Marco Rubio has been an incredible champion for disclosure behind the scenes, and participated in my film and helped open the public's eyes to the extent of this cover-up. But most people don't know the extent to which he's been involved behind the scenes. He's the force behind almost every big milestone for disclosure we've seen.
And you actually have some knowledge of the fight between government agencies over the release of these documents. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so President Trump gave this directive in the middle of February, and then what followed that was the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and several other cabinet members getting tasked with going and finding where this evidence exists, and then getting access to it, and then determining what can safely be declassified and what would not be a threat to national security if shared with the public. And they faced a lot of pushback from various intelligence agencies and branches of the military that did not want to release the evidence they had. And so there's been this significant tug of war happening behind the scenes. And what has shaken out of that is a treasure trove of evidence. And today was the first release of some of it. But they're continuing to try to wrestle this evidence out of the hands of various intelligence agencies so that they can release more in the coming months. And I'm told there's going to be a lot more released in the near future.
What do you make of the timing of this release, though, Dan? Many feel like it's meant as a distraction from the war in Iran, high gas prices, things that are not favorable to this administration. Do you believe in that, or do you think the timing is completely coincidental?
No, I don't think it's a cover for anything. This has been a process that's been unfolding for almost 10 years now. While I was making the film, a number of the interview subjects I interviewed participated in historic congressional hearings to bring about transparency on this topic. The release of the film was a major milestone for disclosure. We knew and hoped it would lead to a big presidential action. That's what happened in February. This is just the natural, ripple effects of that directive being put in motion. I do know, the Secretary of War, the Director of National Intelligence, key cabinet members are all over this, and they want to make as much possible for the American people in terms of transparency.
Yeah, you mentioned that you believe the government's sort of dipping its toe, so to speak, in releasing some of these files. So what else do you think we're going to learn? What else is going to be released that's really going to shock people?
So look, the big headlines revealed in my film are that there's been an 80-year cover-up of the existence of non-human intelligent life, that elements of the U.S. government have been retrieving crashed craft of non-human origin since the 40s and been gatekeeping this information, hiding it from the American public, Congress, and even sitting presidents. So that's the headline, the biggest cover-up in human history. Also revealed in my film is that those same people that have been gatekeeping this information have been involved in a high-stakes, secret Cold War race with adversarial nations like China and Russia to reverse engineer this technology of non-human origin. And it's referred to by a number of high-level people in my film as the Manhattan Project on steroids. The stakes couldn't be higher. Those headlines are certainly now out there thanks to what my interview subjects went on the record about. But I think we're going to learn a lot more about that. And I think we're eventually going to get to a place where we see a sitting president step to the microphone and tell the world, we are not alone. The U.S. government has known about this for many years. We are in this high-stakes secret Cold War race. It'll probably be a speech similar to Kennedy's famous speech he gave at Rice University when we entered the space race. And he said very thoughtfully that space technology, like nuclear technology, has no conscience of its own. It's up to mankind whether it's used for good or evil. And that is why it was important that the U.S. led in the space race, so we could make sure that that technology is used for the betterment of all mankind and not to create a new sea of war. A similar speech is likely to happen on this, because this is technology. These UAP are displaying abilities, technology that could revolutionize the way we live. It could solve the energy crisis. It could change our lives in many, many ways. But it could also be used to create weapons of mass destruction. And so it's really imperative that we as a nation keep this it's now a national priority. It needs to remain a national priority, and we need to put the right resources and brain power towards it. And I think it's going to take a presidential speech like that to just do a level set with the American public and let them know what's going on, what's at stake, and why it has to remain a priority.
How does this relate to the space race that's happening between the U.S. and, say, China and Russia? Is it related? Are they looking into similar pieces of evidence?
Yeah, China and Russia have very active programs to investigate UAP, to retrieve crashed UAP, to try to reverse engineer this technology. Yeah, it truly is a high-stakes secret Cold War race.
Because there's a lot of skeptics who believe that these unidentified flying objects are nothing more than flying objects created by our adversaries that are hoping to gain more information about our own capabilities, militarily or surveillance capabilities. What do you make of that theory?
I mean, look, everyone I interviewed in my film was on the same page with regard to that. They all felt that if an adversary like China had leapfrogged us technologically by decades, as this technology would suggest, that's the biggest intelligence failure in the history of the U.S. government.
The film is called The Age of Disclosure, and you can watch it worldwide on Prime Video for purchase or rent. Dan Farah, great to see you again. Don't be a stranger. I'm sure we'll be calling you back as more of these files are eventually released by the government. But great to see you.
Thank you. You too.